Hi, my name is Lydia Kostopoulos, and I'm a strategy and emerging technologies advisor with a deep passion for body data tracking and human performance. All in the pursuit of feeling great and having as much energy as possible to pursue the things that fill me with joy and purpose. This interview series is about discovering how others have created and are curating their personal healthy aging protocol, one that aligns with their values and the person that they desire to be and become. I hope you find it to be of interest. Let's dive in. Hi, Dolf. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I was hoping we could start with an introduction of who you are and what you're all about.
Lydia, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And from a bio standpoint, I guess what I'd say is my name is Dolf Berle. My current job is that I'm the CEO for Nothing Bundt Cakes, which is the largest specialty cake maker, perhaps in the world. And I'm the father of 3 children. I've been married to my wife, Julia, for 26 years. I'm the world champion in the pole vault for men aged 60 to 64. I'm ranked number 2 in the world in the decathlon. I've had a 20 plus year career as a track and field competitor in age groups. And from a give back to society standpoint, I'm on the boards of the Norman Rockwell Museum, where I'm the chair. I'm on the board of USA Track and Field and also the National Make-A-Wish Foundation.
You are so well-rounded. I love everything that you're doing. You lead like such a full life. Speaking of which,
Striving. I'm just striving. Yes.
Well, we all are. And I want to hear about your healthy aging protocol. I know that for you, it's been a multi-decade journey. And I thought we might start maybe at the beginning, because for you, I know that the seed for healthy aging has been planted as a child. So tell me about that.
It's such an interesting question, and it's caused me to reflect on how I've thought about healthy aging or living, to the fullest of my potential over the course of my life. And I realized that before the age of 10, I started to understand how important it was to have routines and protocols in order to take care of yourself. And the reason for that, more than anything, is that my father was insulin-dependent diabetic and a very robust, strong man, but fragile in the sense of being, diabetic. And so he was extremely disciplined around training from a cardiovascular standpoint, and also what he ate, and very, very limited as it relates to things like alcohol. And so I grew up admiring him greatly on so many levels, but in part because of his discipline. And I was grateful for that too, because we understood that he would live a much shorter life and have a very poor quality of life if he didn't do those things. So that instilled in me the notion that this is something to do as you get older. And that was really probably the first strong impulse that I had to take this kind of thing seriously.
And from your mother's side?
Well, there's a story there too, which is that she grew up on a dairy farm where I later worked. And my grandparents absolutely preached the idea that if you took good care of the cows and they produced healthy milk, this was our service as a family to our community, which we could provide the best, most nutritious milk. And that would mean that everyone out there who was drinking it would be stronger and able to do their work better and live robustly. And so there was a whole ethos in the family that, what you ate and the quality of that food and the tie back to the land were some things that was actually important if you were going to be a healthy human being. So there was no chance for me to stray from anything other than like a pretty disciplined and wholesome view of that kind of philosophy.
So this was your first decade of life. And then when you got into your teenage years and you were in high school, like, how did you build on this knowledge? Like, what did you do? What were the choices that you made?
So probably around the age of 12 or 13, I became a massive enthusiast related to the Olympics. Part of that was because my grandfather on my mom's side had been the alternate and had gone to the Olympics as an alternate for the Olympic outdoor pentathlon, which he had gone to West Point. And so he kind of introduced me to the Olympic ideals, and I started reading about it. And at the same time, I loved comic books, and I'm a massive Captain America fan. And there's all these sort of super people who have remarkable capability and they do good in the world. And I was reading about King Arthur and chivalry and all these things. And so I said to myself, I want to try to be like that if I can. And training to be, doing hard work and also being strong and kind of robust and tough in the outdoors and able to withstand difficult things, and training to be stronger and more resilient was something that was like a wonderful thing to try to do. And so I really got into it in that way, and I decided that I wanted to see if I could ultimately compete in some sport in college. Originally, I was a soccer player more so, but track and field gravitated to me because of all the ideals that I just spoke to you about, and decathlon particularly, because decathlon is sort of the most versatile, well-rounded athlete, at least in track and field terms. And some would say maybe in all sports. So I started to do the kind of training which involved strength and also speed and endurance. And decathletes are the combination of all those things. So you don't train for any one modality, one type of strength or capability. You try to be as versatile as possible. And I was lucky because genetically it was something that I could train for and see improvements in. Mm-hmm. And then I had a supportive environment around me in terms of my family. And so my teens were really just about kind of growing and being stronger and faster and better and cultivating my mind, and with the hope that I could someday maybe compete at the college level.
And when you went to the college level, did you think that what you were doing as an athlete was like being healthy, or that you were on a healthy aging journey? Or was it like, I think this is great, I just want to do this, and that's it? Like, did you recognize that this was...
It was more the latter.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have that consciousness at all. All I was responding to was the opportunity to compete and try to compete at a high level. And I think I intrinsically knew that it was healthy because I made the decision not to drink alcohol, and I made the decision to try to eat healthy food. And I recognized that there was a correlation between sleep and performance, whether it was academic or athletic. So some of the seeds for a later sort of more holistic thinking around aging, as well as you could, were being planted, but I was all about performance. Mm-hmm. And so everything was driven about how do you run, half a second faster in the 400 meters, or how do you jump another inch in the high jump. And that was actually the very beginning of me understanding that recovery is something that's also important, but it was only a tiny part of my mind. It became a dominant thing when I was a little older. But at that age, it was just train as hard as you could. Sometimes you got hurt, then you just recovered from it, and keep training as hard as you can and compete as hard as you can. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you're living under the specter of the fact that your college career is only so long, and maybe there's a chance that you could compete afterwards. But in my case, I eventually realized I probably wouldn't be able to. I didn't have quite enough natural talent. And so I needed to make the most of the college years. And I competed as a decathlete for Harvard College.
That's amazing. And so then after you finished competing, so that was your big drive for your performance and taking care of your body. But then when that competition was over and you were out of college, did you intentionally try to continue to take care of your health even though you weren't competing?
Yes. So at that point, I embark on a professional career in business. I am married not terribly long after that. And so I'm lifting weights and I'm jogging. And I did that for about 15 years. And I was therefore able to stay in some level of shape and not be hurt. And the fun thing about being in your 20s and the early 30s, particularly, at least for most men, is you can be stronger and stronger and stronger. And so in the weight room, you can get stronger and stronger because your body sort of naturally, matures that way. So I focused on that and became stronger and stronger and stiffer and unable to sprint. And I also, at that point, I was diagnosed with Graves' disease, right? So autoimmune runs in our family. Graves' disease is a thyroid disease. And for me, it hasn't been debilitating, but I have to take a replacement for thyroid hormone daily and have since I was about 35. And I'm not sure how it's affected how I feel because I'm inside myself. But it's one more reason why I try to make sure I'm disciplined and careful about the medicine and also how I take care of myself.
Well, then I know after your 30s, I know for you, 40 was this big kind of like special moment because you realized that you could compete again. And so then there's this like Dolf 2.0 where you start to like take all of your like lessons learned. So like, tell me about that. What was your, after 40 revelation and your healthy aging protocol after that?
Yes. So I should tell you that there were some big shifts right at that point. Our first child, Bax, who is now 24, he was diagnosed with autism at the age of about 18 months, and it was pretty emotionally shattering. It was a very difficult diagnosis, very difficult for Julia, my wife, and for me, and we resolved to do everything we could to take care of him. So physical exercise took on a different meaning for me at that point. And I returned to track and field to compete as a matter of like self-healing. I now realize that what it was. I needed something that was joyful, something that I could control, something that was like a deep part of who I was in a more joyful phase of my life. And I just learned that there was, masters or veteran, if you want to call it, or age group competition. And the combination of competition and also all the training goes with it really filled my bucket. And decathlon was a good thing for me to try to do, or pole vaulting, particularly because it's so hard. I started with that and then I expanded back to decathlon because I could do it in the early morning and there was community around it, but it was something that I could do that didn't require me to meet at certain times with teams, which I really would have enjoyed, but I couldn't do it with my work responsibility. And what was so interesting, Lydia, was that the science had progressed massively from when I was 20 and last competed at a high level versus trying to do it again at 40. So much more science around nutrition and training. And the biggest change in the science was recovery. As I read more about the appropriate way to train for anyone, honestly, never mind when you're older, the idea that recovery is part of the training and that you need periodization in your training and it's perfectly fine to actually relax, and you need it in order to rejuvenate and to compete better at a later time. That was a new concept for me. And so I was able to integrate that into my work my training, and at the same time recognizing that was something I could probably do through discipline physically. I needed it for my mind also. That was when I incorporated transcendental meditation as part of my wellness. And that I felt was extremely beneficial in just introducing the idea of trying to find a deeper calm and not be in a constant fight or flight sort of always aggressive warrior mode, which was my natural state, I would say, for my whole life up until the point that I realized maybe it didn't have to be that way.
So what is transcendental meditation compared to, let's say, the meditation we hear about regularly about like being mindful, like thinking about your thoughts and all of that? What is the difference?
Yeah, I think there are many wonderful types of meditation, and those who study it would say that you could choose any number and probably get a lot of benefits. Transcendental meditation focuses on a mantra and is more the clearing of the mind as opposed to intense focus on one thing and trying to prevent your mind from drifting. And the words that they use in that kind of philosophy is, trying to reach, tap into universal consciousness. There's all kinds of words that you can use. For me, it is a mental technique that has been very effective in allowing me to be more present, to have a slight mental vacation every day from everything that I'm worried about. And I noticed as soon as I started doing it, about 6 weeks afterwards, that I was noticing things around me that had always been there, that I simply was blowing past because I was so preoccupied with my to-do list.
That's a really nice explanation. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes, I'll give you the specific example. I heard the birds for the first time after 6 years of working out in my garage, when the birds were always there. We were living in Southern California at the time, and I had never heard the birds before until 6 weeks after meditating. It's like, wow, how beautiful. The birds are singing, and the birds sing 24 hours. The birds sing all year long, every year where we lived. And I'd never heard them before because my mind was so preoccupied with all the things I was worried about, right?
That's fascinating, training the mind.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
So
yeah,
because
we're allowing for the mind.
Oh, sorry. So because we're looking at this kind of like decade by decade, before we move on to the 50s, like if you were to summarize like the things that you've learned on your healthy aging journey in your 40s, what would you summarize that chapter, the 40s chapter for you like?
Yeah, I would say the importance of recovery. I think the level of decline between the 40s and the 30s is not that significant. I mean, you can be, depending on who you are and depending on how hard you've applied yourself to something, you can be better at almost anything in your 40s physically than you were in your 30s. And it requires specific training, but the 40s can be a very remarkable time. Mm-hmm. And what you have to do is really keep track of any serious injury. And what I learned in my 40s actually was I used to only go to physiotherapy or massage or doctors or chiropractic when I was hurt, which was periodically in some way. And I learned in my 40s that if you could do some amount of that prophylactically, mm-hmm. meaning regularly, that you actually stave off injury. And so I changed my philosophy around that. Now, by the way, I was lucky because I had jobs that allowed me to have resources to be able to go and see some of those people, mm-hmm. which I recognize as a privilege. But that is something I learned, is if you can do some amount of ongoing self-care with a little bit of help from the outside and mm-hmm. start that earlier than you think you need it, it pays wonderful long-term benefits.
Well, I know for you, you started your 50s decades very strong because at the age of 50, you won a world championship competition.
Yes.
And so maybe you could tell us about that.
Yes. So I would say when I hit 50, I was probably the most honed sort of athletically that I was in my whole life, mm-hmm. because it was all coming together for me. And I'd had now so many years of repetitions technically, and I really knew my body. And I didn't mention this, but I was very motivated to try to be at my very best in 50, because when I was 40, I came in second in the pole vault and fourth in the decathlon in the world championships. And because they're every other year, and because there are people, genetically superior to me, a year younger than me, when I was 45, I had to be 46 and compete, and all the 45-year-olds pushed me down in the rankings. But when I was 50, it was prime time. And so I was able to win the world championship in the pole vault and become in third in the decathlon. So I improved my placings and was able to medal in each. And I have to say that by the time I was 50, I was less worried about rankings and sort of medals, which I was achievement sort of oriented, maybe more even than as healthy when I was younger that way. And now it was more like, wow, how well can I train? Mm-hmm. How smart can I be about it? And how high can I go mm-hmm. With this body and with my capabilities and all the stresses in my life? And so I felt very, and so the biggest thing by 50 was I started to really understand just how much of a team it takes to perform at a really high level. Mm-hmm. And so it was at that point that I met my still wonderful coach, who is, I think, at least 25 or 30 years younger than me. and just a superb, well, he's 30 years younger than me. And that I dialed that in. And then I had developed the right routines around different kinds of physical therapy. By that time, I had been gluten and dairy free for a number of years, which made a really significant difference in my overall health. And also, at least for me, those things really made a big difference.
How did they make a difference for you?
Well, so the combination of going gluten and dairy free for me were a few things. Inflammation went down for me significantly because I could feel it in my hands and so on. And I used to get 2 colds a year, just routinely, my whole life. And then I went for maybe, well, a decade, between 9 or 10 years without getting a cold, which was luck in part, I'm sure. And it wasn't until COVID, and I got COVID, that I was sick. And I attributed that in part to the dairy. I felt dairy would always make me a bit congested. And then if I had an allergy, maybe it would turn into either a flu or infection. And so that sort of went away. And also, I think in terms of weight, as soon as I went on that eating protocol, I no longer ever had to manage my weight. So, I sort of vary between, I compete ideally at about 178 pounds. In the off season when I'm running less and lifting more, I might go up to 183. But that's a very manageable sort of difference between off season and on season. And if I'm 178, I'm actually hungry all the time, which is not a great way to live, but it is a way to be really fast and like honed, and like every ounce makes a difference when you're jumping and so on. So I don't really think a whole lot about weight, but that just happens naturally with my training. My big opportunity now is sugar. I really have a sweet tooth, and I need to think hard about how do I do a little bit less of that.
So your 50s, though, you continue to again win again, because at 55, you again were world champion.
Yes.
#1 pole vault again. And it sounds like you are becoming kind of this better version of an athlete of yourself when you're like looking into maintaining your body all the time, like even when you don't have an injury, like you said, like proactively.
Yes. So at that point, I realized that, feeling a certain way and training a certain way is actually just my identity. And it's the way I just choose to live. So there's not a separation in my mind between, being in training or working for a competition and just kind of who I am and how I live. And it's an identity that is chosen, right? And by the way, it's a bit extreme. Like I'm clear on the fact that it's not for everybody, and I don't even recommend it to other people. It's not my place to do that. But for me, it really works. And there was ongoing adversity related to medical situations in our family. I eventually, rose to the level of being a CEO for companies, and that is, challenging at times, and particularly was challenging during the pandemic. And so other people use words like, training and what you do is like putting on armor so that your day you greet the day feeling like you can rise to the occasion of any adversity that's presented. And so I think I believe that, but I would say also that a big change in my 50s is, so the change really was going from a feeling of all of that lifestyle and all that work being, partly for external validation, and then having it convert more over into internal validation. At this point, I don't really think that more medals or more whatever probably changes a lot of either my resume or how I think about things, but the joy of competing and the opportunity to see my friends who I compete with that I only see when I compete with them, and the test, the experiment of like, what can my body and my mind do as I age? What is that going to be like? And here's what it's like to be 60, if I could say, because I know I can anticipate the next decade question. What I'm finding at 60 is you have to fight for absolutely everything you want. Almost nothing stays or comes naturally. Flexibility doesn't stay or come naturally. Neither does strength. Neither does speed. Neither does cardiovascular. So I can train each of those systems, and I can get good results, but I have to put active pressure against every one of them. And I think in my 40s, I could do less flexibility and work on some other things and still be fast and still feel good. And even in my early 50s, I could let something, go a little bit, but they all kind of kept, going, staying in a good place. It is a fight for everything when you're my age. And I'm excited to compete in a year now in Sweden against other 60-year-olds. And it's fascinating because I observe other men who do what I do, and everyone has everyone has a different curve, and some people are able to maintain longer than others. A lot of the world-class people, I'm one of the people who realize I can't go hard every year. So I work hard at being particularly athletically competitive in the early part of an age group, the first 2 years, and then I maintain and work on things, all my weak points, and then I go hard at the beginning of the next age group, and that's how I can maintain, high rankings in the world in what I do. The men that I've competed against who are incredible for, say, 7 or 8 years, they're all out of the sport. They ended up having hip replacements, knee replacements, back injuries, because to compete, to train at a really high level as you get older for something violent like track and field, I think it's not sustainable unless you have long periods of good, healthy training, but not the really violent competition day in, day out, multiple times a year. It seems that that's not something the human body can do. But what you can get better and better at is the mental aspects of competition. And so I would say I'm a better mental athlete than I've ever been, only from trying so many things, continuing to read, talking to people like you. And that's fun for me to try to someday put together, maybe the perfect decathlon where every event goes as well as you hope. Because in 10 events, it's almost never that an athlete, almost no athlete who's even professional decathletes, almost never have their ideal meet, like in their whole life, right? And it's their whole time job, their job. So that's the holy grail, right? Is to try to see if you could put that together someday. And I'm getting closer. As I age, because I understand it better.
So what I'm hearing is that competition actually transformed you, and preparing for the decathlon became much more than that. It became a lifestyle, and then it became an identity. And then,
yes.
And by default, it became your healthy aging protocol without you even kind of saying, this is going to be my healthy aging protocol. And then now you've kind of honed in on it. And now in your 60s, you're looking at kind of the mental aspect, looking to compete and maintain strength and endurance and all of that, but not go all out to get injured as you've seen others. And so now when you talked about getting in at the beginning of an age group, are you looking at 70 now? Are you looking to compete at 70? Are you planning for that? What's the rest of, your healthy aging plan? What are you thinking that you're going to change, like looking forward?
So I'm 60 now. So I'm in the sweet spot of competing well and hard. So, when I turned 60, I was able to win the world championship in the pole vault indoors. I won our outdoor national meet in decathlon. And then the world championships, because they're every other year, are next year. So I'll be 61. And so I'm in prime time for my age group. I am going to try to compete at the highest possible level. Of course, any remaining meets in 2024, but also in 2025. And then after that, what I will do is I will take a careful assessment of where my opportunities are. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, okay, should I be doing that much more yoga? Should I work on weak point training? Is balance and my nervous system something that I need to really work on? I'll be quite disciplined about, like, what do I need to keep up? and work and try to improve so that I can maintain the highest overall level. And over the course of ages 63 and 64, that'll be 62, 63, 64, that'll be a prime focus. And I'll stay in the sport so that I have the muscle memory and the kind of maintain the skill of competing, but I'll do it more modestly. And then at 64, I'll ramp back up because I'll need to feel the intensity of, for example, running all the way to the wall. So in my decathlon this last year, I ran an all-out 400 and an all-out 1500. And it took me about 2.5 months to recover from doing that back to back on 2 successive days with the rest of the decathlon. Recover back to the point where I could do it again, is what I would say. And so you have to, your mind has to be able to do that and know that you can do it safely, but also you're willing to go to that level of pain and exhaustion. And that's a bit of a skill because it's scary, right? So what I've learned is you have to practice being brave in order to be brave. You can't just muster it out of nowhere. You have to have some confidence and you have to say, okay, now it's time to be brave, and you got to be excited about that. So all of those things will probably be the next stage. And then I think at this point, I've got a pretty good shot of staying in the sport through 65, but I think that I sort of take it age group by age group now. I would love to do it into my 80s and basically until I'm dead. Which hopefully is, some time from now. I think that because of my level of talent or lack thereof, I am not in the frame for a national or world record, probably until I hit 70 plus. I may have the ability to hold on long enough to be at that level. So I'm just starting to get to a point where I can have the notion that I might be good enough to be the best all-time American in the decathlon, and perhaps in the pole vault if I focused on it even a little more. And that's a new fun thing because I'm sort of in the top group all-time, maybe number 4, I think, all-time decathlon and heptathlon. But a national record to be the best of all time, that's the one level that I think I never thought I could approach. Probably just didn't feel that I have talent. But as time goes by, if I can maintain it, that would be a goal, and that would be fun to see whether that's possible.
So I think that's really valuable there to, you're in your 60s and you have like these big, audacious goals for your 70s. And that gives also purpose. And I think something else I would take away from what you've said is about knowing your body, like your body is a machine, and understanding how your body's machine works so that you can like better get in tune with it, I think is really wonderful. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I couldn't think of a better person to end this series with than you. So thank you.
It's very kind of you. If I can say one more thing, Lydia, I think you made me think of something that I just hadn't maybe processed quite that way up to the point. But what the decathlon and has done for me in terms of identity and a way of thinking about the world has massive carryover into my work and the kind of leader that I am and the things that I try to get involved with even outside work, which an example would be, trying to fund and support organizations that are trying to do good things in our sport, or in the case of Make-A-Wish, kids who really need support that way. So like my encouragement to people, and I'm not maybe the one to give advice necessarily, but my encouragement to people is you can find something that you loved when you were young, and it really hits all the buckets of personal passion and your purpose, and it's heart, mind, body, and soul. Like that's a really wonderful thing. Like I would just wish that for everybody.
That's awesome.
It makes me emotional to think about it. It's so lucky, right?
Yes.
And it's interesting to me that trauma was the thing that really crystallized that for me and made me realize it so clearly. Because it was sort of joy and exuberance and trying to excel earlier on. And then it was really challenging things that really solidified it for me, which makes me realize like I have no choice but to live this way, right? Like I'm really happy and clear about these choices in it. And I just hope everybody could have that in their life. And I don't think it has to be athletics. Like, it could be anything, right? It doesn't matter. It's just whatever your thing is. Yeah.
Oh, well,
anyway, so yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And there's a lot to be said about finding that thing that like really drives you and you feel so aligned with, because that is, like you said, it's like your identity. It becomes you. It's the easiest thing to be you. It's very hard to be somebody that's not you.
Oh, that is such a beautiful statement. Wow. Yeah. It's a real pleasure to talk to you, Lydia. And I have to say, I just, having gotten to know you a little bit, I'm tremendously admiring of your work and the way that you think about the world and what you're trying to do. And, please let me know if I can ever help you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. And I look forward to hearing what others have to say about your healthy aging protocol. This series is meant to capture personal stories of individual healthy aging protocols and is for informational purposes only, and it does not constitute providing medical advice or professional services. Those seeking personal medical advice should consult with a licensed healthcare practitioner. If you'd like to keep up to date with Dolf, you can find him on LinkedIn, and the company that he works for, Nothing Bundt Cakes, can be found at Nothing Bundt, BUNDT, cakes.com. And 24hourfitness.com is the company that he's a board member of.